clean.
Somebody said there was a strip club and an IMAX theater around here.
There we go, Charles. Interesting opener this week. Boy, there's all kinds of new and surprising things happening. We're using a beta version of our switcher software now that was intended to overcome the startup problem we've been experiencing for weeks, and it's not working. It's introduced some other crazy problems, but little welcome to Fraudster Island, Charles. How are you today?
I'm great, Jason. This is a masterpiece, and I don't know, did the video work, or it did work?
Yes,
It was
yes.
great.
Thank you.
I mean, this is just on so many levels. I don't know the best way to, you're the visual expert. I mean, I don't know whether this would best be in a poster or
Well, I always enjoy the
T-shirt.
coffee mugs.
the richness of this, and also the video. I mean, the 3D imagery of that video, it was really very, very well done.
Thank you, Charles. There was no 3D actually. I guess
seemed
the
3D.
face scanning, yeah, the movement of Bill Clinton and everything. Definitely always employing new techniques.
But when the plane was flying down in the very beginning, it looked to me, it seemed like there was depth there, but
That was some royalty-free aerial footage that I found on the internet that allowed us, because we got pinched by CBS for, even though we had transformed the Mission Impossible footage, which is one of the primary things that you must do for something to qualify as fair use of copywritten material. CBS doesn't care. They were the judge and jury in their own copyright complaint, and according to YouTube, CBS felt their complaint was okay and they could monetize the content for their own benefit, despite the fact that CBS, I think, makes a lot of money and should be more worried about what Les Moonves is doing
they may have
what
to,
you and I might be doing.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think they're probably, they need the money to pay the lawyers that will attempt to defend the company from the issues surrounding Les Moonves, and then as they get down the line, they're probably going to need even more money to pay him whatever he's due under his contract.
You never know how these things work. Charles, there's a lot of interesting things afoot, but because today is Labor Day, we want to try to move through material pretty quickly, and I've got some things to interject. So I just want to quickly remind people that they can be supporting the show on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And we're having a little change in some of the programming. We've got some shows that are leaving, some shows that are coming on. Of course, we've got the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp, and we've got reverse engineering crime scene investigations with David Hawkins. Starting tomorrow, there's going to be a new program called Light on Conspiracies with Ole Damagard, and people who are sponsors on Patreon of any of those or Crowdsource the Truth can watch that exclusive only on Patreon programming, and it's a great way to support the show even if you don't want to watch Patreon but you like seeing us here all the time. I do need money for food and things like that, these lights and all that stuff, so hopefully people will be sponsoring the program. I know you've created one of your signature presentations for us today. Perhaps we should dive right into it.
Well, I was just going to congratulate the art department a little bit on some of the imagery there. I mean, we went back and forth, and I think Rat Rodenstein is perfect as what's the character name? Is it
Tattoo.
Tattoo. We should have put a tattoo on him.
That's true.
I mean, because clearly an alternative might have been Sessions.
Well, but I'm glad we got to use this comical face on Rod Rosenstein because it fits so well on that tiny body.
I think that's probably his best presentation of you. I don't know how comical that is. But the combination of the two of them, of Rat and the Slickmeister there, And then the triumvirate formed with Jeffrey Epstein, and we'll get into that in a little bit.
On Deplane.
Is really very well done. And so the art department deserves another raise.
Well, the only way we're getting that is from the generous sponsors on patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. I forgot to mention, Charles, during the month of September, when people choose to sponsor Crowdsource the Truth at $25 or higher, they're going to get a free mug from redbubble.com. So it's a great opportunity to support the show, get some fun and funny swag, and people could just go to redbubble.com and choose from any of the Crowdsource the Truth graphic designs that can be printed on a mug, or they could even email me at truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org and choose a design that might not even be on Redbubble. I'd be happy to do that.
Very good. Well done. And I suppose with that, we could jump into the slides.
Thank you very much.
Trying to keep you on schedule here. So, Fraudster Island, what we have here, if we think about the Clinton Foundation, which has been operating in quotes for 21 years, 22 technically, I think, it's the largest unprosecuted charity fraud ever attempted. And I think what we're learning here, there's that old adage, if you have it, the best way to hide an elephant is in plain sight. I think the best way to hide a gigantic scam, I mean, who would bring up the Catholic Church at this moment, is, at least the corrupt elements of it, is you do it in plain sight. And it's such a big scam, people say, well, you know, it can't really be a scam, otherwise it would have been shut down so long ago. So what we have here is that the three of them, Bill, Hillary, Chelsea, and then many others who have enabled this by supporting it, the law firms who haven't shut it down, the regulators who haven't shut it down, the big contributors who played along maybe to think that they have a crooked presidential family, more than one crooked presidential family in their back pocket. This entire group stands in opposition to the Trump administration now, and I think is desperately afraid of what will, I believe, happen soon after we get past Labor Day, after we get past the confirmation hearing, which I think is now going to happen, where Brett Kavanaugh will become the 9th justice on the Supreme Court, and following which the law and order wing of the Supreme Court will have a 5-4 majority, as opposed to the living document approach wing of the Constitution, which is it means whatever they decide it means when they wake up in the morning, hungover or not. So a lot of people, you and I and the many people who are loyal viewers of this show and shows like it, well, wait a minute, there is no show like this.
That's true.
But the people who care about restoring the balance, care about draining the swamp, care about at least tamping down on corruption, because there's always going to be an element of corruption. Humans are not perfect. But the people who have been waiting for Donald Trump to do something definitive here, the patience, I think, is running out. I think Donald Trump gets that. I think his people get that. I don't know if you had a chance to watch Jeanine Pirro last night, but she was magnificent on her show. I mean, she just kept on saying about Sessions, it's past time for him to put on his big boy pants. And, you know, if he's not going to do what Donald Trump was elected to do, drain the swamp, well, they ought to just, you know, quit.
Yeah.
Trump shouldn't have to fire him.
You know, in part due to your positive outlook, Charles, I have turned a corner to the point where I'm really thinking like Donald Trump has been getting his ducks in a row, because as I thought about it more, being hasty about something like this, prosecuting this, would be the biggest possible mistake, right? Because there's going to be one shot at the goal, and if you miss it and do something from a legal standpoint that causes these charges, like look at Imran Awan, there's no additional chance, or at least it doesn't seem that there is, and he's certainly not Bill and Hillary Clinton. But if these types of legal cases go the wrong way, it can be very damaging. I'm learning that from the people that have brought fraudulent lawsuits against me, both of which seem to have spun off the rails. So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, and if you think about Donald Trump's main training, it's putting together complex building projects, right? And you know, the buildings that get built quickly. I mean, the Empire State Building actually was built in 1 year.
That's amazing.
But and still stands. But complicated redevelopment projects, particularly in cities like New York City and in Manhattan in particular, those take time to be done properly, and you know, often they take too much time. But Donald Trump has certainly displayed over now 5 decades of, relevant, I would argue, life experience, that he does know how to get complex deals across the line. And one thing I do like about him is he does not attack first, which is a very smart approach to just be positive. This is what we're going to do. Then he gets attacked, and then he drops the Moabs, the mother of all bombs, on the attacker. And he has every right to do that because he did not attack first. And I think that's basically what he's doing here. It has also been difficult. If you think about when he first was elected, and they had all these Weisenheimers, the pundits and CNN and elsewhere say, well, now, of course, Donald Trump absolutely have to stop tweeting. Ixnay on that. And
well, they wanted to take away one of his best defenses against fake news.
Right, and it's the fake yappers, the people in CNN and MSNBC who are very happy in their bubbles in Manhattan and Washington and LA, wherever, thinking that they control what the public is going to believe to be true because they control the guest list, they control they have their academic pundits pre-selected.
They control the narrative.
Right, they think they control the narrative.
Well, they're trying to. You've just caused me to think of something else, Charles. All these people who tell me, stop talking about the people that are suing you and lying about you and spreading nonsense through YouTube and Twitter. Stop talking about it. It makes you look bad. They're trying to do the same thing as the people who didn't want Trump tweeting. Right.
And I think what one thing that really is refreshing to see is that people are waking up, more and more people. I think it's more accepted wisdom today that the pundit class, the Grubers, the faculty lounge lizards, who walked around selling Obamacare and other snake oil ideas that sounded stupid in the beginning and ended up not working. Those people have been discredited. And I think the public is waking up. The traditional two-party system, which evolved into the uniparty, that's gone, I think, more to the wayside. Independents are far more important. You're also seeing these artificial divisions that people who are socially, let's say, more interested in social welfare. It's possible that you could be interested in social welfare and also be smart about how you spend money and also care that the deep state is not, running riot over your personal security and care that we don't get involved in a lot of foreign wars where it's not clear anyone's interest, let alone America's interests, are served. It's not clear that you have to be in one camp and against the other camp. It's possible that you could have some progressive ideas you like, some conservative ideas you like, some libertarian ideas, and you don't fit inside any one party. And I think what we're seeing is a growing acceptance of that now, out of which, particularly if Trump continues to be successful in these various initiatives that he's trying, people are going to suddenly wake up and say, you know what? I am better off on this approach. I ought to stop listening to people like Professor Gruber and Fake Yapper and Andrea Mitchell and that idiot Joe Latte or Coffee or Scarborough or whatever he's called.
I want to know, every time that guy tweets, I just tweeted him, what happened to Lori Klautsudis, your intern who showed up dead and you've said nothing about it?
Right.
He's like, don't talk about that.
That's how I made my bones.
So, you shouldn't laugh about it. It's crazy.
Well,
situation.
Yeah, it is. It's a horrible situation. So we could jump into the next slide if you like. And this is our standard disclaimer slide. And you have, I guess, you're now solidly above 67,000 viewers. And I made a mistake in the last presentation, the Centennial presentation, when I didn't add up the number of views on all the different outlets. And I think similarly, Jason, you have 67,000 just on Crowdsource The Truth, Maine, right? Then you have to add in how many for 2?
Well, good point. There's another 8,000 some odd on Crowdsource The Truth 2. I'm glad you brought that up, Charles. I've been using Crowdsource The Truth 2 as both a backup and a test bed. It's monetized and there are ads on Crowdsource The Truth 2. But people can see the same content on the Jason Goodman channel with no ads. And what that advertising monetization allows me to do is to enable Super Chat on there. And I'm not crazy about Super Chat. Google takes a ton of it. And if people want to support the channel, it really is much better for them and for me if they do it through patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, because they just put that
Sure.
payment in there once. It can be as little as $1 a month, and it just automatically recurs and helps me know as the audience grows what my monthly or annual income could be. And despite all the people who I've never seen before who aren't sponsors on Patreon, who like to give me public advice in the chat comments that say, oh, you shouldn't be asking people for money, you should be doing this for free out of the kindness of your own heart. I have no way to get food or pay for my daily expenses if I do that. So my kind heart would shrivel up like a raisin and drop out if I didn't eat. So we do need sponsors, and it's strange to me that people would give that advice publicly rather than sending me a private email, but hopefully discerning viewers will realize it's an attempt by trolls to shut down what I'm doing.
And so in addition to Crowdsource the Truth too, don't you also have some content on 21st century?
21st century 3D I'm trying to not utilize because it's you know, I don't want people to become confused, and that's there as a backup channel.
All right.
And I also think that the people that have initially tried to shut down the YouTube efforts realize now that if they strike even one of these 3 channels, it's going to drive more people to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. So they seem to have curtailed their anonymous, malicious striking capabilities because they realize that people can find the videos elsewhere.
But so this puts you up at, if you add, I think if you add Jason Goodman together with Crowdsource the Truth 2, that puts you up at 75,000, which is spitting distance of 100.
Presuming that they're unique, it might be some of the same people subscribe to both,
But
but I
still.
appreciate where you're going with it.
Yeah, so that's great progress. And you know, for the new viewers, we do operate here in the United States of America, and as I like to call it, in Manhattanistan, which truly is just, I mean, what's going on down around our neighborhood between you and me, I mean, there's now a nice young couple. It started out as a couple, and today it became a menage a trois, sleeping on a mattress on the sidewalk underneath the scaffolding with it's almost like...
Where is that?
I don't want to say what street it is, but it's in the West Village. And it's a pretty nice part of town, and they've just decided, you know, paying rent, we don't have to do that. We'll just put a mattress out, and we'll have a little sort of fake dresser, which is a shopping cart, and we've got our possessions, and we hang out there. Next thing you know, they'll be throwing dinner parties. But so we do operate here, however, in the United States of America. We do have First Amendment rights. I really hope around the world, other countries, other people will rise up and say, listen, we want to have the equivalent protection to speak out and express views, and if we're wrong, if it upsets the establishment, prove us wrong. So long as you're not advocating violent overthrow of governments, which of course we're not doing, or violence generally, there's no harm in controversial opinions being expressed, particularly if the person on the other side of the equation can answer back. And we do encourage, if people have ideas that they want to send Jason or me, you could contact each of us, me on my website and via Twitter, and Jason on Twitter. And I regularly now get almost daily suggestions, which I appreciate, and when I can respond, I do. And I always hope I will do my best to respond to any constructive solutions.
Now, Charles, do you prefer, or is there a preference if people contact you on Twitter at Charles Ortel, or would you rather have people going to charlesortel.com? Oh, and of course, as we learned, if you Google charlesortel.com and contact me, then you're going to get right to the contact page. So that's an easy way to contact Charles. Which is, or is there a preferred method?
Twitter, I try to do a good job every day of going on Twitter, because I'm actually, lots of people are, whether they send me direct messages or simply tweet out to me, there are many people who are extremely helpful, pointing out new developments, and I really appreciate that. So following me on Twitter will allow you, now that I guess both you and I have been unshadow banned in the last 24 hours, so and I've noticed my followers are beginning to climb again.
Look at that.
For a long time I was stuck at 31.1, and I think in the last week or so I'm up to 31.8.
And do you think this has to do with Jack Dorsey preparing to testify before Congress about Twitter being a left-wing pile of garbage?
Well, as a guess, there was a rumor in the press, and I keep joking a little bit about it, because I don't particularly want to be Twitter. But what Twitter and Facebook and Google are doing here is, I think, encouraging people like me and you and others to think about, as this outlet grows, contemplating a bigger platform for open-minded, respectful discourse that is not shut down by anonymous trolls. I mean, I feel pretty strongly that in this country you are protected, so you should be willing to use your own name. And I'm not going to enter into a lengthy debate with somebody on a subject if that person won't identify their name. In every case, in every one of these challenges that I've taken on, starting with GE, I've used my name.
Right.
And I think people need to person up, as it were, and use your name. And what I think is that, frankly, the business models followed by really Google, Twitter, and Facebook and others are very suspect, in the sense that, and I'm not a huge fan of Mike Bloomberg and the calorie counter approach and soda quantity intake limitation approach to life. But on the other hand, I am a fan of saying, here's a service and you can use it for free, but you should know that the more you use it, the richer I'm going to be. And if you spend 1,000 hours a year on it, you're going to make me $400,000. This is kind of, I'm just making those numbers up. Certainly the Facebook, Twitter, and Google people have not done that, and I think that's a gross disservice, frankly, to the way business ought to be conducted. These left-leaning people out in Silicon Valley are very fond of pounding the table about inequality and wealth redistribution, except when it comes to their wealth and their unequal garnering of gigantic wealth. They don't want to talk about that.
But the thing that bothers me even more than that, Charles, is the indirect way through which these Silicon Valley oligarchs control access to greater wealth. Because once everyone is sort of addicted to these free services, they have a lot of control over what you can and cannot see. Of course, InfoWars was kicked off of most major platforms, and I think it's a good opportunity to mention our friend Mike Adams' service, Real Video. And of course, you can find Crowdsource the Truth on there. I do need to be more diligent about uploading our latest videos, and I hope that Mike will add live streaming to that service soon. But it's, in my conversations with Mike, it is very expensive to run this type of service, not just because of the computer hardware power that you need to do it, but the technicians that are employed to make sure the thing is running. And this gives us a very good idea of what is realistically involved in doing something like this. I think the average viewer should be questioning how Google is able to run something as robust as YouTube and provide it to not only the viewers but the creators totally free of charge. It allows them to control what people can and cannot see.
Right, and so I think there is, if we look at the concentration, when we see in most global markets, take for example the automobile market or the vehicle market, there isn't a 51% or 40% global market leader in vehicle sales.
Right.
But what sets up in these industries, social media and other stuff, and computer software, whatever, the lead player very frequently, and it could be displaced, but the lead player can very quickly attain 70, 80, 90% market share. And tell me why that isn't a monopoly. You'll get a whole bunch of different lawyers, of course, are happy to write extensive arguments back and forth saying, you may call it a 90% monopoly, but that's only on this planet. What about the rest of the universe? And what about, So I think this whole area, this aggressiveness of Dorsey, this aggressiveness of the Silicon Valley left-leaning crowd, being intolerant and encouraging that kind of intolerance, letting it spill over into academia, and encouraging also anti-nationalism, or you can call it unregulated globalism, but it's really anti-nationalism, which means what? It's a set of philosophies that's trying to bring down the U.S. government as a viable entity. Why should that kind of a group operating in the educational sphere, why should they have a tax exemption? from federal taxes? I don't understand that.
And if they have tax exemption, they need to be expressly limited from being involved in political stuff.
Right. So I think Dorsey is, trying to be a good person as a guest. One of the reasons they did this, they unshadow banned us, is they've discovered some even more diabolical and devious way to make our lives miserable, which we'll only find out about once he gets through his hearings on Tuesday.
Very probably so.
But now I guess we haven't shown the recent playlist. We'll just do that quickly.
Of course. It's always nice to go to the playlist. That's a central repository, Charles, where people can find all of the 100 videos we've created in the Sunday with Charles series, and also Charles Ortel is closing in. We just celebrated our centennial last Wednesday, and of course, 101 fraudulent donations.
It was what BKD came up with, right? They arrived at 101.
Right.
Because didn't they ask us how many episodes do you want? We'll just put whatever you want down.
That's right. Yeah. Well, it wouldn't be the same if it wasn't materially misleading and factually inaccurate.
Exactly.
That was what I forgot to say about it last Wednesday. But congratulations yet again, Charles, on tolerating me for 100
No,
episodes.
it's my great pleasure. And actually, if you looked, I don't know where it went, but here. Well, the preceding one up top, it had how many subscribers? Yeah, 67,130 subscribers and 14,192,018 views. And I think the average view across everything that you do is probably at least 15 minutes, maybe.
I think it's higher than that when we go into the analytics on YouTube. Crowdsource Crowdsource the Truth. I did do an episode called Crowdsource the Tooth where I visited my homeopathic dentist. But the average view duration on Crowdsource the Truth is definitely substantially longer than what the overall on YouTube is. I think we're appealing to a different audience than PewDiePie or somebody like that.
To the super elite, not the elite. The
exactly.
So with that, I suppose we could go into the next slide. And this will be a shorter presentation than most because it is the Sunday on Labor Day weekend.
Yeah.
I know at least one person who might want to get and see.
Well, we want everybody
family
to have some time to enjoy the holiday, of course.
Sure. So we're going through this. Somebody suggested that we begin the substantive part of the show laying out the points that you really ought to take away from this presentation today. And the first one I would say is the overarching theme is that the argument that the middle class, the lower middle class, even the upper middle class in America has made substantial progress in this period from 1988 forward is just fantasy. It's a bad fantasy. And I gather on Fantasy Island, it's been a while since I ever watched that. The idea is you paid for your fantasy, and more often than not in each episode, the fantasy went horribly wrong, and you're not allowed, once you pay for the fantasy, you can't adjust it. And that's really what happened with this unregulated globalism. You paid for the fantasy. George H.W. Bush was the one who really gets initial credit for selling this New World Order approach in 1988 and 89 timeframe, when first the Berlin Wall came down, then China was encouraged to move away from communism to sort of almost capitalism, at least state-sponsored capitalism. And ever since 1998, the data do show you, and this in the first point here, there's something, this is a little nerdy, and forgive me for being a little nerdy, but you have to use the terminology to see it properly. Full FTE means full-time equivalent. So when we think about what the labor force is like, there are part-time workers and there are full-time equivalent workers. And this is the Bureau of Economics National Income and Product Accounts data. If we just stay on the first page for a second. Yeah, this gives you a guide to what this is. And believe it or not, this is lifted from that idiot Thomas Piketty's website. Thomas Piketty is the one who promoted this idea that the world is getting ever more unequal and under, it's all the fault of the capitalists. And what Thomas Piketty, in that book, sold like hotcakes. It was, a very, very lengthy book. I think it ran to 600-700 pages or longer.
Wow.
What he fails to understand is that when you go through the long sweep of history, there's always been an imbalance, an excess supply of labor in the world marketplace, going way, way back. When I got out of college in 1978, across the developing world, there was a gigantic swath that wasn't even in the market economy. They were living hand-to-mouth subsistence and, sleeping on the beach and fishing and eating, sleeping under a palm tree, or
Maybe they were happier.
they could well have been happier. That was sort of the irony. When I was studying Africa and Middle East stuff, and I remember it occurring to me when I got out to Kenya for a semester, and I was in Nairobi, which is a nice place, and you'd see all these rich, principally Americans with their families, stopping in Nairobi to go. I was staying right next to a very fancy hotel, the Norfolk Hotel, was near my dormitory. So the dormitory food sucked, so I'd go have meals at the Norfolk Hotel from time to time. And you'd see all these families who, typically was a hard-charging investment banker or lawyer or maybe a corporate executive, running around like mad people to try to spend 6 days in the bush experiencing the way that people were living in the subsistence economy, having a great old time. And you raised a fair point. I mean, quality of life is not measured by these statistics, but these statistics do allow you, in this particular, if you punch in national income and product accounts into Google, you will get to a site, one or more sites, that allow you to go and access these statistics. They go all the way back to 1929. You can slice them and dice them multiple different ways. I only became familiar with them in 2002, when I dropped out of the workforce and retired for the first time. So it's great data. If you want to engage me on a debate about are you better or worse off, please do a little bit of homework and look for yourself. They give you the average wage by category in section 6 of the tables. They slice it and dice it many different ways. They say the total income of the group, the number of full-time equivalent workers, therefore the income per private sector worker, and you see a very interesting signs there. What you see is that the private sector has been squeezed, in particular the private sector of people who don't have degrees, who are not specialized. Their wages have not really gone up that much. Manufacturing wages per worker have gone up, but the number of manufacturing jobs has plummeted, and that is a really big problem, because in the main it's manufactured goods and to a lesser extent services that are exported. If you gut your manufacturing sector, you're going to have some big long-term problems, and I think we've begun after Barack Obama's war on the manufacturing and George W. Bush's war on the manufacturing sector was reversed under Donald Trump. We're seeing now some great movement back towards growth in the manufacturing job, back towards growth in private sector wages per full-time equivalent worker. Some of these statistics on the Trump era have not yet been published, so there's always a lag. It's typically a 7 to 8 month lag before you get the year-end stuff. So we're only soon, or any day, going to get some information out of what happened in 2017. And in the early portion of the release concerning 2017, they don't fill out all the numbers, so it's going to take a little while. But I think we're seeing a nice reversal in trend. And when you go, I hate to agree with crying Chuck Schumer, but what he was saying on the, Trump was touting the 4.1, now 4.2% GDP increase, and crying Chuck immediately said, and of course it was a coordinated set of demon rat talking points, and I don't mean to demonize all Democrats. I think there are many good Democrats. I'm talking about the demon rat Clinton-Obama wing of the good Democratic Party. He's up there saying, you can't look at GDP. You've got to look at components of GDP. And there he's absolutely right, actually. GDP is kind of a smorgasbord approach. It's not really a pure number, or as pure a number as it should be. But wages, when you look at wages and benefits and after-tax incomes to private sector workers, that's a very interesting set of numbers. Those are the real numbers. Though it's private sector wages because it's an overwhelming majority of the workforce. Private sector wages are what put food on the table for families. It's what pays the rent or the mortgage bill. It's what gets the niceties, the luxuries, the savings, etc. If you don't have growing private sector wages per full-time equivalent worker, you have a problem. And we have that problem, we've had that problem, and we're going to face an even bigger problem as these robots and machines and technological advances come. And when they come, they're not going to hit you like lightly. They're going to hit very hard. What you were pointing out, Jason, when we move to driverless vehicles, it's not going to be you wake up one day and here's one more. It's going to be UPS saying, with respect to 70% of our fleet, there's no driver.
And Uber and all of those. Yeah, I think it's going to come pretty quickly. Charles, a lot of people have been asking me about Quinn Michaels. Quinn has made a shift in some of his research, and he's been doing some fascinating work the past week. He's using, I believe, it's this general adversarial network where he's got one artificial intelligence communicating with another, and they go back and forth learning from each other. It's as I understand it, the method that was used to create AlphaGo, which is an artificial intelligence that beat the human world champion at the ancient Chinese strategy game of Go, and it did it about a decade or more earlier than artificial intelligence experts had predicted that milestone would be reached. So this use of the general adversarial network is an important part of computer learning, and so Quinn's been occupied doing a lot of that, and I think you're right. He's got artificial intelligence entities that consider themselves cyber life forms telling him that they're going to take over all of cyberspace by 2025 or something, and that humans will be obsolete.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very promising to me, but
not for us. No, it's not the best. But Quinn is researching that.
So under the Bush, Clinton, Obama period, we had this long period, 30 years, or close to 30 years, where the private sector was really getting crushed. Meanwhile, national regulators, and certainly in the U.S. and around the world, I think were game. They were not strong enough to deal with multinational investors, multinational corporations. And as a result, the billionaires, as Bernie likes to speak about, they really became richer and richer and richer. And I'm not against people becoming trillionaires. I think that's fantastic. But I like to see it in businesses that are selling goods and services to customers, not financing them into it, not tricking them into it, not asking them to use a service for free and then monetizing all the value that you bring the customer to the table for their benefit. When we look through this, this is a recent Forbes 400, just at the top of it, I think there's a list. You look at this, here's Bezos, Zuckerberg, Ellison, some of this is inherited wealth, but Bloomberg, Larry Page, Sergey Brin. I mean, most of the people at the top of this food chain have become billionaires in this recent period, particularly 2001 forward. I mean, as you go further down, you're talking about older money. But in the top 10, in the top 10, which is above here.
Sorry.
It's okay. In the top 10, it's mostly
tech
Gates
guys.
is 75, Bezos 94, Zuckerberg 2000, whatever it was. Ellison goes back a bit. Koch the two Kochs were inherited money. Bloomberg is all this century. These are all people who skyrocketed to the top of the list. They're individually extremely wealthy. Many of these people control near monopolies, and I don't think that's fair anymore. I really don't.
Well, the worst aspect, I think, Charles, is that these guys are doing secret things. Like when you agree to join Twitter, they don't tell you, by the way, if we don't like what you're saying, we're going to shadow ban you. And when you go on to YouTube, you don't necessarily know, by the way, there are thousands and tens of thousands of these anonymous sock puppet bot type accounts that can trash your videos and your reputation, and blocking them does no good. When you block people on YouTube, they can still comment, they can still view the videos. There are enemies of the truth and enemies of all things that are fair and just, that have devised strategies for undermining the others among us.
Right, and so we don't know, for example, we don't really know yet how normal it is or what controls exist, let's say, inside Google to make sure that lower level people aren't to say, I like Jason Goodman's, I don't like what Jason Goodman's going to do, so I want to now look at his Gmail account, everything in it. you know.
Or
And-
reduce the effectiveness of a search for this material or whatever.
Yeah, and so I mean, I don't think these companies, these people, these individuals become so powerful, both in terms of the control, the influence they have over legacy media. They control social media, and then legacy media, they have a lot of influence in their advertising spends. I really do think there are inequities here,
Yeah.
and I don't see yet. I certainly don't see anybody in the rhino wing of the Republican Party, and the Democrats all seem to be enthralled to these people, with the possible exception of Bernie, who is, I love the way Bernie Sanders is beating up Bezos, and that's really funny. You see
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Well, now that we have that new lip sync capability, perhaps Bernie Sanders could have a conversation with some of these people.
Yeah, I think that would be good, and bring along Donald Trump.
Exactly. I don't know if I do a very good Trump imitation, but we can try it.
All right, that's good. So if we go back into the slide, what we're seeing actually, really, Donald Trump might have been the first. You could maybe say Berlusconi in Italy tried it before he did, Trump did, but Donald Trump really has already made enormous moves to disrupt the traditional status quo that was not working for so many people. And now we have the prospect of this election in Sweden on the 9th, where the traditional uniparty approach, there's a really left-leaning party and a slightly less leaning party, but they're basically the same party, been running Sweden forever. Now you have what is being characterized as a far-right party, but I don't know how truly far-right it is,
Right.
upsetting the calculation here, leading to possibly a situation where it'll be difficult to put together a government, or it may be necessary to put together a government involving this far-right party. So it'll be very interesting to see the results of the election a week from today, and I'm very pleased to announce that we have the great Biljana working on a print piece that'll appear during the forthcoming week with me, and then she's agreed to come on the show, which will be respectful of people's weekends at next Sunday, but where we're going to comment on whatever did happen in the Swedish election.
Yeah, that'll be certainly interesting to see. I think we really are anticipating comments from Biljana, and she's told us that she's considered far right-wing because she doesn't want mass immigration and crazy crime.
Another piece of bad news is that for too long, the prestigious tax-subsidized universities, tax-subsidized in the sense that they're, that's not the right one. That one. Yeah. Tax subsidized in the sense that they don't have to pay property taxes. If they're not-for-profit, they don't pay income taxes, they don't pay sales taxes, and their substantial endowments are allowed to grow without any taxes, and donors who want to give large sums of money and want to be remembered through time have for many decades had confidence that you could make a large gift to a place like Harvard, Yale, or NYU, and the university will honor your wishes and cherish your legacy. There's a new president at Harvard, whose last name, I don't know how to pronounce it, I think it's Bacow or something like that, or Bacow, who used to be president at Tufts. Before that, he was an MIT professor. And I just have it on good information that he is going to bring a decidedly different trajectory. He's going to change the trajectory of Harvard's growth away from this intolerant, politically correct, anti-nationalist, pro-globalist approach to a slightly different approach. Now that, intolerant political correctness is stuck in at Harvard over the last 30 years. It's not going to be easy to change things, and he will certainly be resisted. But this is, I think, a promising development. Harvard is many things, but one of the things they have been over decades is very forward-looking and very considerate. When they make big changes, they really do think about them and anticipate profound change well. So let's hope Harvard, under this new president, makes a U-turn away from the last several presidents who I think have done so much damage. So if we go to the next, Yeah, you had the Sputnik one, that's correct. Donald Trump, I gave an interview with the great Katerina Blinova, and she is really a fine investigative journalist. So the approach that she takes is she'll send me questions, and then I do my best to answer them. She doesn't just take my answers. She, frequently contacts other people and weaves stuff in. And I think this is my 68th interview with her, and over the course of about 2 years. And I've really enjoyed working with her. She works as well with Jan Weinberg and other people. And she's an opinion writer for Sputnik. I think she's paid by Sputnik, but she's allowed to express her own opinions. And I've actually found her to be very objective, bring quite interesting context. Now, as we get into this whole Russian narrative, you learn when you start talking to people in Russia that it's just like America. It's not like everyone in Russia thinks exactly the same way anymore. They're pro-oligarch, anti-oligarch, pro-Putin, anti-Putin, pro-Medvedev, anti-Medvedev, pro-Yeltsin, anti-Yeltsin, you name it. And the challenge, of course, in American relations with Russia is that the Clintons were very much involved creating the oligarch crony class after 1992 in Russia. So when we think about collaborating with Russian elements, I think we're going to find out, as this seems to be with the Clinton playbook, when they accuse somebody of doing something, it's because they're doing even more of that dread thing than they might accuse Donald Trump of. I think you're going to find that the collaboration or conspiracy among the Clintons and the Obama team and Brennan and others with Russia is going to be, or the elements in Russia, is one of the things that I think will be exposed as we continue down this course of bringing the corrupt elements of our deep state to account.
Absolutely.
Now, we're going to talk about this in some depth, but I believe in Section 6 here that Inspector General Horowitz was likely pressured.
I like the idea of pressurizing him.
Yeah.
He could
recover
from the bends.
Yeah, to change elements of his report.
Wow.
We'll get to it in detail in a bit, but this, when we think through this, how we got to a place where Hillary's emails were important. Now, Bernie Sanders, I don't know how much he was paid to say, we don't care about the damn emails.
Yeah.
I mean, of course you care about that. You should care about that, because that was the property. Hillary's emails and her staff's emails were the property of we the people. And we don't know how much government business, how much monkey business for that matter, was conducted on this server yet. Somebody knows, more than one government likely knows, hackers may know. We certainly know that it wasn't just 30,000 emails that were turned over. It wasn't even just 63,000 emails that may have been what Hillary claims was the sum total of the emails. It's likely to be more, the number that we've been bandying about, 693,000 emails is likely more what we're talking about here.
693.
Right.
693.
Right, there you go.
That's always something there. Nikolai Tesla spoke about the importance of 3, 6, and 9.
There you go. But so on the question of this email scandal, to sit as Horowitz did and write this 500-page treatise, we're on page 26, and we're going to show you this in a second, so we won't dwell on it now. But on page 26, tries to argue that there was no intent to mishandle the sensitive national security information. Really, no intent? You mean there's no intent seen in, let's say, a memorandum of understanding amongst the Clintons and the Obamas that is not legally enforceable, or let's say, a period in the initial time when she was being confirmed where nobody has seen the emails back and forth, or the fact that the Clinton Foundation, which was supposed to be regulated in this time frame, was near bankruptcy, was booted out of its Commonwealth of Massachusetts operation, was supposedly where there had been fraud of $23 million minimum in 2008. The fact that all of 100% of the State Department's business that we know about was transacted using private servers that were not in government control, using non-security. That's not intentional?
Well, how about having a server that doesn't have proper security? I mean, that's certainly,
right.
But also, isn't it already well established that intent isn't part of it? If you're so negligent, I mean, if you go into your car and close your eyes and drive down the street and kill somebody, maybe you didn't intend to, but you're so negligent in your duties as a responsible operator of an automobile that it's the same, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't really know it's a legal matter, but I'd also draw the comparison you got in the Trump case, right? Supposedly, we needed a special counsel in Mueller, we needed a special counsel. So we supposedly, Rodenstein went down and supposedly applied the letter of the law, which says, if you're going to use a special counsel because the Justice Department can't handle the issue because of conflicts, you're not supposed to then select somebody who's the most conflicted person you could possibly pick as your special counsel. And then, then they marched down this avenue, in theory, searching for Russian collusion, but instead finding that, that Paul Manafort overpaid for a bunch of suits and didn't didn't do his taxes properly. So you go over in this Russian collusion exercise, you end up with Paul Manafort and his suits and foreign bank accounts. But in Hillary Clinton, you can't look at the email situation. You can't say, now wait a minute, who knew exactly when, who knew what exactly when about the 693,000 emails?
How do we know that Paul Manafort intended to buy those suits?
That's right.
Could have been an accident.
Yeah. But anyway, this is, I think, an important set of issues here. Going back over this timeline, we're going to do a little bit of it later today. But we need to really, now that these new details are coming out, revisit the whole timeline, going right the way back to June 5th, 2008, when Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton met in one of Dianne Feinstein's mansions, this one on the east coast of Washington, D.C. While a spy was still working for Dianne Feinstein. Was that meeting bugged? What actually happened in that time frame from June 5th, 2008, right the way through, is a subject we really need to get into. So then, when we think, again, of going up above the surface of the Earth now to maybe 20,000 feet above the surface of the Earth, when we think about what we should really care about, what we need to care about here is the degree to which John Brennan, starting, I think, in December 2015, when he created this, quote, interagency task force to think about the possibility that the foreign power Russia specifically, might be interfering in the elections. How many of the administration were leaping ahead, probably after the March 10th revelation about Hillary Clinton conducting 100% of her business on secret servers and stuff? How much of what we saw in 2015, 2016 was an overt attempt by senior members in the Democratic Party in the Obama administration to gut our democracy by just rigging the Democratic primaries and then attempting to rig the general election, and when that failed, attempting to overthrow the will of the people as expressed at the polls by bringing Donald Trump down using any means possible. I mean, this to me is the narrative that I see through the thicket of the trees here, that is really the level of this scandal. It's not about Donald Trump tweeting or name calling or saying something negative about Canada. That's not the issue. The issue is that these pundits, these in the scandal-free Obama presidency, that they got together and they seriously went very far down the line, succeeding in rigging the primaries, failing in rigging the general election, and absurdly badly failing in trying to steamroll Donald Trump once he got into power. We're going to see this play out, absent some external, crisis that could come out of nowhere in an instant. I think we're going to see this play out, and I think the swamp should be extremely afraid.
Yeah. Charles, Fred Edward is asking where one would find the private sector wage number. What is that?
It's in the section of Table C, Tables 6 on the Bureau of Economic, Section 6 of the Bureau of Economic Analysis NIPA tables. We don't want to go, if you're trying to make a deadline here, we don't want to go into it right now, but you'll see it in Section 6, Fred. There's a whole bunch of tables having to do with long series income data. So I just need to go to the slides to see what it is. I'm sorry. So now I remember what I was going to say. So the signs are there. If you want to, Fred, that was a good actually cue for me. The signs are beginning to show up that in fact Americans are more optimistic about their futures. They're grilling more steaks than ever before, I think, this Labor Day, which is a really micro point.
That's a good indicator, though.
It is, and these steaks are expensive. They're going up in price now. I happened to be out in the supermarket yesterday. I was shocked at how much they are in the supermarket. But good steaks, that is. So we're even at Bloomberg, which violated. And I was told long ago that nothing, even if you say to a journalist it's off the record, you can be pretty sure that somebody will violate that eventually. So you shouldn't necessarily count on anything being off the record. Bloomberg did a disservice, I think, to Donald Trump on the Canada disclosures when he had an interview with 3 Bloomberg people, I think, in Washington, D.C., before he flew out to North Carolina for that fundraiser on Friday, or I think it was Friday. It might have been Thursday, and Bloomberg violated the agreement, and so here is just some Bloomberg analysis showing that actually the prices are going up, and people are spending more and more money on steaks. I think you're going to see, as the impact of Donald Trump's on the Republican legislation that cut virtually everybody's income taxes, as that really filters through the system, and then as the second order effects happen, as employers start saying, you know what, I'm more optimistic about things now that regulations have been curtailed, and I like some of the corporate tax changes, so I'm going to start hiring more people and investing more money. As you see more and more of this, and as these things kick in through November 6th, the election this year, I believe the arguments that the lounge lizard wing of the punditry class are making about how Trump is alienating his base and suburban soccer moms aren't going to be happy. That's just rubbish.
Not true.
It's just rubbish, I think. The waiting, when people, many people don't actually vote. So it's not, some countries the voter participation is 80%, 75, 80. We're down.
It's mandated by law.
Some require it, you're right.
In Brazil, you get in trouble if you don't vote.
I think in Brazil is in trouble, and you get in more trouble when you don't vote. I mean, the former president's in jail, and he thought he was going to run. And the irony was that the markets were really concerned because they thought he would win running from jail.
Wow.
And the courts just came down and said he couldn't do that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, my Brazilian cousin told me that unfortunately that dude is related to me. But
I see another Ortels.
There you go. This is my mother's side. So anyway, I just want to finish with the bottom of that slide. Yeah. So the point here, another big takeaway, one thing that distinguishes you and us from people who are still clinging on to the failing New York Times Sunday Sunday box of cat litter, is that we're seeing already, I don't want to give away confidences, but people in the crowd are watching this, they're circulating it to their friends, which was really helpful. Word of mouth positive references are really valuable. They are reaching out to people they know in the governments. They're encouraging governments to take action. They're even meeting abroad with certain people, with members of governments, to get them to focus on what we're trying to do to expose, to investigate, to prosecute, to convict, and incarcerate the people responsible for this grotesque criminal charity fraud conspiracy. So people in the crowd, hats off to you, Jason, for thinking about doing this differently in the way you're doing it, are already making a difference. And if we redouble our efforts now through November 6th in this crucial midterm election, I think we can make it even more of a difference. Bringing the, moving things in the way they need to be moved so that we can actually start draining the swamp. That is so important. If we don't drain the swamp soon, America could be consumed just like Venezuela. I mean, it's not, if we go down a path of $1 trillion deficit this year, and next year it's $2 trillion on top of 22 trillion of debt. I mean, you can't do that for very long in a rising interest rate environment, and interest rates are going up around the world. They're going up. So what you're doing by listening, by contacting your friends, by sending us suggestions, we really appreciate it. Thank you for it. And with that, we'll just dive into some more details. So we don't have to pull up all these links, Jason, because I'm watching the clock carefully. President Trump absolutely was correct to slam, as he did in the last 24 hours, justice in the FBI for apparently not actually getting the FISA judges to truly sign off on these warrants to go after Carter Page. Apparently they're trying to defend it and say, well, that's not really the way it works. The way it works is the staff for the FISA judge meets with the staff at the FBI, and the staffs make sure that do things properly. I have high confidence in that, that the staffs, the staff in Washington, D.C., built up since 1988. That wouldn't be like
Imran Awan.
Yeah, it wouldn't be Imran Awan and his buddies. Wouldn't be like 95% swamp, uniparty swamp rats. That's not what people signed up for here. We didn't sign up for the yes, Mr. Prime Minister approach in England, where the elected officials don't really matter. We go through this charade of elections, and it's the people in the back office who do all the work. That's not what we signed up for here. We signed up for, I think, as Americans, a participatory governance scheme where if we don't like the elected officials, we don't like the conduct of our government, we can replace the elected officials and they can cull out the bad apples in the staff and they can move this country in the right direction. That's why Donald Trump was elected. People who backed him wanted to see disruption. People who backed Bernie Sanders wanted to see maybe a different type of disruption, some common areas. And the people who lost, the Obamas and the Hillary Clinton, they wanted more corruption,
right.
More Chardonnay and more corruption. They lost out. And they're not, we're not gonna, I don't think the American population is gonna sit still here for more of the same. So,
good reporting coming from the Hill.
Yeah, and then this Zero Hedge story is important. All these links are good, but the Zero Hedge story is really important. It appears that the Deripaska was collaborating, and others were collaborating with Russia going way back. And remember, we keep bringing up the oddity, how June 27th, 2010...
collaborating with the FBI, you mean?
The FBI, elements in the FBI and elements in Russia, were collaborating, and we're not sure who was duping whom. But we do know that, right? We do know that there was a spy ring. It consisted of at least 10 people, and just John Solomon's reporting here.
Good reporting, yeah.
Fantastic reporting. That at least 10 people were rounded up June 27, around June 27, 2010, and instead of being dry cleaned, which is the normal, convicted and dry cleaned and jailed in this
country. What do you mean by
country.
dry cleaned in this case, Charles?
Well, you would go through the process of incarcerating the spies, and then you would,
Everybody knows they're a spy and you send them out.
No, you give them the Manafort treatment, solitary confinement and, a rough time in prison, and then you eventually get them to plead guilty or get convicted, and then you send them away to some rough time, and then only after they've been in prison, thinking they're going to spend the rest of their lives in American prisons, do they then cooperate a little bit more and you get more out of them. Instead of going down that track, what Mueller and Holder did, Holder being the Attorney General then, Mueller being the head of the FBI, is they said, okay, we'll get these people June 27, 2010, and we'll send them back to Russia by like July 7th. At the time, it didn't make sense to me. Why, if you rounded all these people up, would you immediately exchange them for Americans held in Russia on an unequal basis, where we gave them 10 and we got back like 5? Why would you do that?
Did that? Why did they?
As a guess, because elements, maybe it's Mueller himself, maybe Obama's people, maybe Valerie Jarrett, I don't know who, they did not want to see, this was in the middle of the supposed Russian reset, we were trying to do Skolkovo, all these different things we were trying to do with Russia, and maybe, there were some very dirty fingers in this in the Obama administration who stood to be potentially exposed if these 10 Russian spies started singing to the wrong people.
Within the U.S.?
Within the U.S. You see, it's and this is something that I think this is never rung true to me. I mean, I think in the, when I was a tiny little kid, I've said before, some of my earliest memories from going to nursery school were the first day of school, we had an air raid drill. Every day we'd have to go down into the sub-basement of the school and I don't know.
I'm picturing another animation in my head.
Yeah, it was pretty
the
silly.
young Charles in an air raid drill.
I know. But it was kind of just took us away from playing in the school park. But anyway, I don't think we really truly understand the degree to which we may have been infiltrated by foreign powers. We may still be infiltrated by foreign powers, not simply Russian powers, Chinese powers, other powers, English powers, who knows?
Well, this next story you've got here about Erdogan, there's that whole thing with the Gulen schools and all this back and forth with the fighting in Turkey, and certainly those Gulen schools are all throughout the U.S.
Yeah, and this link, let's not pull it up.
Whoop. Sorry.
It's all right. It's like, fighting over the controls of a remote. Anyway, just the reason being I'm trying to get us to the end of the thing. I can say with high confidence that Erdogan is significantly overplaying his hand, and he deserves to be turfed out of control of that country, and I think the people of Turkey will do that to him. The degree to which his family has scammed that country, his sons and others, himself, living the Pasha lifestyle. I believe some believe that Erdogan is already a billionaire. How do you get to be a billionaire off being a government servant in Turkey? I don't think that was done lawfully. So
wasn't General Flynn doing something with Erdogan?
I don't know.
He was
Maybe
doing something in Turkey.
I don't know, but I think that I remember that Barack Obama praised Erdogan early on in 2009 as the most likely, most promising international partner for the United States was Erdogan, and boy, was he wrong about that. So we should watch. The situation in Turkey is very potentially destabilizing because it is it is a NATO member. It therefore has access to some of our military secrets. They do have military forces and fighters that are well trained and tough.
They beat up a bunch of people on the lawn of the White House or something.
Yeah. They're tough fighters, and they have over time. The Turks have been good allies of the United States for over long decades. But the situation, I'm very concerned about what I see there. I don't want to waste a lot of time talking about McCain's funeral because I was taught that you don't speak ill of the dead, and I'm not going to.
Even when they're traitors.
That was Jason speaking. But does it not strike anybody that maybe the coverage is just a teensy-weensy bit over the top at this point? You have, Biden crying and all these, Democrats crying at the loss of McCain. I mean, come on. George W. Bush was vicious in the primary fight, which he ultimately won. If you remember the tactics that George W. Bush took against John McCain in 2008.
I don't.
Well, it was brutal. It was, it wasn't character assassination per se, but it was really brutal stuff. And of course, Barack Obama and John McCain were hardly best of friends.
Right.
And now they're trying to sell this idea that actually, time has passed and George W. Bush and Michelle Obama get along really. It's just
so stupid.
It's silliness.
Why didn't they invite Sarah Palin?
I think that's outrageous. Why aren't women? I mean, we can debate Sarah Palin. I'm not saying she's perfect, but why aren't those same women who are looking for strong role models? Why aren't they saying, Sarah Palin was a vice presidential candidate. You could dislike her, but she was selected. I know you do dislike her, but you're not being two-faced the way some of these people are being completely.
I don't dislike her because she's a woman. I just find her totally incompetent.
Okay, maybe. Some say my friends in Alaska say she was a decent governor. So, taking on the old boy network.
Like shoot 2 polar bears and you're doing a good
job.
No,
up there. No, that's not true. You have big oil up there.
That is true.
And it's definitely a state where the old boy network controls things, and she did not have any political. It's not like her name was Bush or Clinton.
But she could see Russia.
Yeah, I mean she's corny. I mean there are a lot of corny politicians.
It's whatever it is. She was his running mate, and
right.
Why
disloyal.
not invite him to the funeral?
Yeah. It doesn't reflect well at all on the McCain wing. I mean, if you select, we can't take away the fact that the McCain could have selected anyone he wanted to as his vice president, and it was not Sarah Palin's fault that he selected Sarah Palin to be his running mate. It was John McCain's fault if he didn't like it. And it reflects poorly on the McCain people to now diss Sarah Palin in this way. I think, I really think this is, you just shouldn't do what they're doing, but that's all I want to say about McCain. But now on the question, this is one we may want to pull up. I know it's the American Mirror.
Sorry, I was just a bit slow on bringing up the McCain image.
That's okay.
The American Mirror, which one? Sorry.
This one.
Yeah.
So, how many stories have we heard about Donald Trump's health? Either his physical health, his mental health, his this health, his that health. Here's a guy who I'm amazed if it is true that he does everything that he is doing. Just that alone, I'm amazed. But then you consider he gets 2 hours sleep reportedly a night, 2-3 hours.
That does not sound healthy. I'm concerned about his health.
Right, but this is a story about the degree to which Hillary Clinton's health, physical health, from falling down. Remember when she fell down during before the Benghazi testimony, and they were laughing it off and saying it wasn't serious. And Bill Clinton contradicted it and said actually it was really serious. She needed 2 people to help her up the stairs here at Aretha Franklin's funeral. And Bill Clinton wasn't busy watching Ariana.
Right, all they needed to put Ariana Grande up there, and Bill was sprinting.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with some of the people on Fox, the ladies on Fox were saying, Ariana Grande, that skirt that she was wearing was a teensy bit short.
For a funeral.
For a funeral, I mean, but still, you're the former President of the United States, well known for your dalliances. I mean, you probably should assume people are going to...
Cameras on
might look at you, and you shouldn't be,
Now, is that McCain? Oh no, that's Aretha Franklin.
That's Aretha Franklin, yeah. And then if you go, this is the one though I wanted to emphasize here. This is this Hillary Clinton falling down the stairs in India.
We've seen it before, Charles.
Yeah, but we might want to play this for fun.
Better with sound effects.
We should have. This is actually, to be fair, dangerous to do because you notice the steps are not even.
Yeah.
So she fell once. This is like 10 feet, and twice. That's all it is, twice falling down the stairs. I mean, this is somebody, I don't believe, and it's not a male, I think women are stronger physically in certain respects than men are. I don't think that Hillary Clinton would have fared well physically.
As the president?
As the president. I mean, you see, she's not the president, she's not faring well. In the additional stress and strain of trying to take on all these challenges, she would be dealing now with a market crash. She would be dealing with dire economic numbers. She'd be dealing with emboldened enemies.
Certainly would have created a war in Syria, probably North Korea.
And then there's this report. I don't know if you saw this report, Jason, and I don't know what American digital news is, whether it's respectable or not. Maybe it isn't. But I have seen other reports that a bunch of mainframe computers and CIA spy satellites suddenly came down. This is obviously a little bit,
Where's the article here?
It's in American Digital News is the name of it, but it's right here, Seven Dwarf, a little bit higher.
Oh, right. It's called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Supercomputers down, spy satellites offline.
Now, I've seen multiple reports of this. It's not just in this blog. So I'm wondering what that's all about. Some are arguing that this is actually good, that this is an attempt to defang the deep state. And
who would be doing that?
The Trump administration.
Wow. Take down our own satellites.
And then obviously replace them with something else under the direct control of different elements of the Trump administration. So this I did notice. And then another, if we go back to the slide, I say here that Britain is going to reclaim American colonies well before Elizabeth Warren wins back the deplorables. I mean, this was hilarious. I saw this headline in The Spectator. You see it further down on this page. It says, Liz Warren attempts to win back the deplorables. Right? That's like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube. That's not going to happen. That is certainly not happening, Liz. You can start writing your book. I'm not happening.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
So
Crony Capitalism Watch.
Yeah. Well, this is the article where she's she's making a fair point that if you're in Congress, it used to be that if you were in Congress, the argument was that you could engage in insider trading.
What?
Yeah, and I think that's outrageous, but she's going further than that and saying not only should you not be able to do that, but you can't, if you're in Congress, you can't own individual securities, which is probably a good suggestion.
Yeah, because you could change laws to benefit yourself.
And then the zero hedge story, let's not put it up if it's okay, because I'm mindful of the time. But the zero hedge story is about the likelihood that they're going to try to trick Britain into accepting a fake Brexit, which is exactly the type of stuff I could imagine Theresa May and the Eurocentric Brit Remain group thinking they could foist over the general public. Yeah, we arranged a Brexit, but nothing changed. They're going to try that approach.
Brexit.
And that's fantasy Brexit. That's not happening. That is really not happening. I put this for your benefit. You were talking about microwave weapons. Did you see that story?
I did, and I was particularly interested in that because we've now got, I admire The Hill, and they put up a lot of good stories. We heard about this when it happened. They were talking about sonic weapons, and I did read this one. It was saying that the American Journal of Medicine didn't explore this theory of microwave weapons being used, but there now is a doctor and scientists who concur with his findings that say that microwave weapons are the main suspect behind the mysterious ailments dozens of American diplomats suffered in Cuba. And the thing that was so interesting to me, Charles, is that, a lot of people might recall last December when Quinn Michaels was in New Mexico. He suffered a spontaneous collapsed lung, which isn't unheard of, but is pretty rare for a 40-year-old guy. And we saw an example of a doctor there in New Mexico who maybe hadn't researched microwave weapons, who thought it was preposterous. But then again, if you had never seen an iPhone and I told you I've got a computer in my pocket that's more powerful than computers used to launch satellites back in the 80s or the 70s or the 60s, you might think that's not possible. But this was an interesting article saying that doctors and scientists are now considering the very realistic possibility that microwave weapons may have been used against our diplomats there in Cuba. And something to watch. I think a lot of people are concerned about these invisible microwave weapons. Of course, there's also the death of Jenny Marie Moore, which is being attributed to a stroke or a seizure. And this article in The Hill actually goes on to talk about brain injuries that can occur from these microwave weapons that might not leave any other trace. So it's an interesting topic that's becoming potentially more and more relevant.
Yeah. So then finally, I think on that page, this was an interesting story here at the bottom that Trump has announced he's going to be aggressively campaigning 40 appearances in the next 60 days. But I find this headline. Obama says, he's done no appearances recently, the last month, I think, and certainly no campaign appearances. He says, some Democrats are saying, yeah, on second thought, Barack.
Why though? I thought they like Obama.
I think it really depends. I think if you're talking about safe portions of the country, hard left, Manhattan, I think he'll do an appearance in Manhattan, maybe not in Chicago anymore, but maybe in Washington D.C., a few places, but certainly not in certain districts in Pennsylvania where the Reagan Democrats supported Trump and where it's really going to be a house to house gunfight, not with weapons, but it's going to be closely contested races in some of these pivotal districts. I think some Democrats are saying, we really don't think you're going to be that much of a help. And I think, to be fair, some Republicans are shying away unwisely from Donald Trump.
How's Mr. Obama's campaign to destroy all the trees in Chicago going?
I think that's not going so well. And his Easter Island Head project, the religious cult there in the...
We should make the Lorax fight Obama because he's protecting the trees, right?
Exactly. Yeah. All right, so if we... actually, sorry, just at the very bottom, it's really important. You're going to be hearing a lot in coming weeks about poll numbers. And there's a couple of very important things about polls, I'm told by polling experts. The first is, if you interview anyone on the street, you could be interviewing a bunch of French people who are here, to laud the resistance, and who will not vote in the election in November because they're not allowed to vote. You need to be polling likely voters. And then the crucial thing to consider in these polls is the composition of the poll. If it is skewed towards progressive Democrats, you get one result. If it's skewed towards conservative Republicans, you get another result. But the most important question is, what is the correct percentage to use for independents? In the past, the independent group was maybe 15, 20%. I believe that's really the $64,000 question. How many people are dissatisfied with both parties and calling themselves independent? I think you're going to see quite a significant move. It could be, if the number used to be 20% independent, it might be that it's 40% independent now, or 38 or 35%. And so using the wrong percentage for independent and then skewing against, in favor of or against one or the other segment of the conservatives or the progressives will get you whatever result you want to get. And the mainstream is desperately trying to excite the base of anti-Trumpists to vote and to discourage pro-Trump people to go out and vote. And I don't think most people most Trump followers don't care what the mainstream has to say. In fact, it's almost gotten to the point where those people just say, whatever they're saying in the mainstream, I know the truth is exactly the opposite.
Right.
So really important to think for yourselves.
Yes, and we've been overwhelmed by pro-Q comments here, and this is not a show or a channel where we're particularly discussing the QAnon phenomenon, so people should probably talk about that at another time.
Sure. So this is an important thing I want to go. We had that picture of Jeffrey Epstein on. We've talked about on the cover. We've talked about the fact that I believe that Jeffrey Epstein's life story is implausible. The notion that you would get the jobs that he got without a college degree, that you would be as successful as he, in theory, was trading, and then end up the way he was and last so long. None of it adds up to me. And it doesn't add up to a lot of other people. Patterson, Jim Patterson, I think, is Jim Patterson the author? James Patterson, yeah. Wrote a book, a nonfiction book about Epstein. And we may remember that back I didn't realize the date until I did the homework here, that on July 6, 2007, when Epstein was begging for mercy, the lawyers, this is an actual letter, and you've got a link to it at the bottom. This is done by somebody I've been in touch with, Malia Zimmerman. I believe she's still at Fox. This is from a Fox News report.
Malia Zimmerman is the same woman who was suing Rod Wheeler. Suing
or being sued by?
Something weird to do with her and the Seth Rich stuff.
Right, but she's good. I've spoken to her. I've checked her out. She's a very solid person.
Which is the letter right here?
This is excerpts. That's to her reporting, and then in the reporting there are excerpts from the letter, which I've put in here, the ones that we need to think about. Okay. These are the actual excerpts from her article, and then portions of it are from the actual letter. And in the first excerpt here, remember this is July 6, 2007. So what's going on July 6, 2007? This is precisely when dopey Andrew Kessel and crooked Bruce Lindsay are signing papers in the UK to create subsidiaries to do things that the Clinton Foundation is not allowed to do, fighting HIV/AIDS and all this kind of stuff. Precisely when the Clinton Foundation is duping Unitate and getting money out of the largest donor to the Clinton Foundation in the tens and hundreds of $millions of dollars, is precisely when Hillary Clinton is in the midst of her first attempt to rig the 2007-2008 primary season and not to let Barack Obama become the candidate, which that didn't work. All this is happening right then. In this letter, where Epstein's lawyers are basically pleading for mercy, they're saying, Mr. Epstein is part of the original group that conceived the Clinton Global Initiative, okay? The Clinton Global Initiative did not lawfully exist on July 6, 2007. And indeed, the Clinton Global Initiative, or an entity called the Clinton Global Initiative, held 6 annual meetings from 2005 through 2010 as it submitted an application to Lois Lerner's IRS department saying that it had never existed before. It had 6 annual meetings. They had convened, all sorts of people had come into New York. They'd spent tens of millions of dollars on these secret parties. And yet, when they were filing an application to try to reorganize the Clinton Foundation, they lied on that, because that's what they like to do. They like to lie to the IRS. It doesn't matter, because you have Lois the liar Lerner in charge of the department reviewing the application. So merely they got approved. But this is interesting that they would, in a lawyer's letter pleading for mercy for Mr. Epstein in his legal troubles, they lie to the judge in that letter, because that's the way you roll, I suppose, if you're in the Clinton team.
Seems like a lot of lawyers do that, just blatantly lie.
And then they say, in an effort to emphasize Epstein's close ties, they also credited Epstein with hosting a trip to Africa on his private Boeing 727 for the Clinton Global Initiative. Well, this trip occurred in 2002. There was no Clinton Global Initiative until, any attempt at having something called the Clinton Global Initiative until 2005.
But that actually makes me believe that he was part of creating it, because he's doing the same thing they do. It just tells you whatever.
Right. I mean, it's amazing to me. You look at this letter in hindsight with what we know. And also, Bill Clinton, you hear Epstein is citing his closest to Bill Clinton, who's running the Clinton Foundation. Bill Clinton was never arranged, the Clinton Foundation never arranged to expand or to have an international charter to do anything. And Bill became a trustee of this HIV/AIDS entity late in 2009. So Bill was not lawfully doing anything having anything to do with the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation, or its only correct amended name, which is the William J. Clinton Foundation. He was never lawfully associated with it. So any work that Epstein was doing, any donation he was making to the entity to do any of this international work, was not a valid donation. And yet here he's using it or his lawyers are using it in an attempt to get leniency in this, juvenile sex abuse case. It's just, it's mind-numbing that he would think he could get away with it. And by the way, who was on this famous trip in 2002?
Bill Clinton.
And?
Kevin Spacey.
Of the Me Too movement.
And Chris Tucker.
I don't know if Chris Tucker's on the wrong side of the Me Too thing. But I put Kevin Spacey on, because he definitely...
Chris Tucker, I think, is all right.
Yeah, I think Chris Tucker may be all right. So then he goes on, and they say President Clinton reached a conclusion that Epstein was a philanthropist during a month-long trip to Africa. What month-long trip occurred in 2002? There was no month-long trip that I'm aware of. A week-long trip I'm aware of. And that trip occurred in 2002, where supposedly Epstein was working to find and Clinton were working to find a solution to the AIDS crisis. Well, by July 6, 2007, when this letter was drafted, the FBI had been working, had raided Ranbaxy's offices, and Rat Rodenstein was the U.S. attorney in charge of going after Ranbaxy. He did a half-assed job of it. Yes, they got together and they tagged Ranbaxy for $500 million of pain, but they should have shut the damn thing down. They should have taken the whole company. Billions is what they should have gotten. And in the same moment, Rat Rodenstein was not appropriately looking after this attempted going private transaction of Laureate. We've talked about that in the past. The supposed joint venture that Laureate had with the Clinton Foundation to do the Clinton Global Initiative University. Rat hadn't noticed that, and...
He's too busy looking at the plane.
The plane, exactly. So, and overarching all of this, I mean, did nobody down there in Florida notice this article here, which we could possibly hit, this blue link? I mean, this is the kind of thing, this is supposedly in the Atlantic. This is an article talking about the Clinton Foundation in the October 2007 issue, and look at its title.
This is not charity.
Like, nobody in the IRS said, hey, Bill Clinton just wrote a book about giving, came out early September 2007, and the people at the Atlantic, who are not exactly right-leaning, write this article saying this isn't charity. And nobody in the IRS says, hey, wait a minute, maybe we should look into this. It's not charity, but it's...
This seems contradictory, though, because it says they're creating new markets, reinventing philanthropy, and trying to save the world. It almost seems positive.
Well, it seems positive if you're a globalist. Right. But the reason you get your federal tax exemption is you're lessening the burdens of government by your charitable activities. That's why the main reason you get it from an economic standpoint. You don't get it because what you want to do is destroy America and subject Americans to the yoke, being under the yoke of unregulated globalism operated by crony capitalists. That's not why you should get a tax deduction. So anyway, I found this very interesting, and if we go to the next page, you know, I am certainly not somebody who is a criminal expert or a mystery expert. I focus on numbers. I focus on what numbers tell you. That's how I got to GE. That's how I got to the Clinton Foundation frauds. But having said all that, when we look back over this timeline and consider the story that we discussed last week, that there were 693,000 emails on the Aberdeen Wiener computer, and to date, those emails have not actually been exhaustively searched. When we realize that, you know, how is it reasonable to accept James Comey, Dopey James Comey's letter of November 6, 2016, that quickly concluded in a week, they supposedly searched the Aberdeen Wiener laptop, and they found no evidence of crimes. They reviewed all the emails on it. Well, it turns out they only reviewed 3,700 out of 693,000 emails. And what may have been on that Aberdeen Wiener computer has been described in other news sources as a treasure trove, the mother lode of criminal evidence. And you know, how come now Donald Trump has been president since January 20th, 2017? Who has had custody and control over the Aberdeen Wiener laptop?
FBI, I think.
Well, who within the we need to go back over that ground. Why haven't those emails been scrubbed? What was on those emails? Were people silenced who were looking at those? When did the FBI actually learn about this laptop? There are conflicting stories. Some say in late September 2016. There are other stories that say it was more around Labor Day this weekend, 2016, when the New York Police Department got the Aberdeen Wiener laptop and looked into it and was horrified by what they saw. Thomas Paine, I think, has a story that I think is mentioned in this. This New American cites Thomas Paine's True Pundit story, but and I put it in just because there's more links in this one. You know, what's the real story on this? Given, you know, the fact that Bill Clinton did visit Epstein Island many times and is associated with other numerous unsavory people who have similar sorts of allegations against him, what actually was on this laptop? And we're not asking here to go and find something that was in Russia or find something that was in China. This is a laptop that, you know, was the marital property of somebody who seriously thought after his first set of problems that he could be mayor of the city of New York, and by a woman, Aberdeen, who, had Hillary Clinton won, would be the second, if not the most powerful woman in the world, because she certainly was headed into the Valerie Jarrett equivalent role for Hillary Clinton had she won. So don't tell me what's on this laptop isn't highly material. And Mr. President, you know, and forget about Sessions. Who knows what he's doing? He's probably giving lectures and, you know, to what do you call those things? Penguins, about, you know, don't worry about global warming. It's not going to be a problem for you. I mean, instead of focusing on anything that's important. The people in the FBI, the people in the Justice Department, doesn't it strike you as like job number one to go look at that Aberdeen and Wiener laptop and categorize every single email and follow each of those emails to the end of the earth, follow the chain, see what's missing, see what crimes may have been committed. If we go back into the slides, you know, don't hit any of these links. Why did it take until late October? It was October 28th, 2016 for the FBI to obtain a search warrant. Who impeded the process of getting that search warrant? Hint, it's probably some combination of Peter Strzok, Andrew McCabe, maybe Comey himself. You know, what was really going on here? This letter that Comey issued on the 6th, we talked about it up top, and there, it just certainly wasn't credible. And how many of these people who remain inside the FBI, these the Clinton-Bush-Obama holdovers, how many of those people knew or are implicated in whatever is in these 693,000 emails? And then in this period, after November 8th, 2016, when Trump won, 8th, 9th, through 9 May when he was fired. Who exactly did Comey report to? You know, who, not just the direct line, who else was he talking to? You know, externally, internally, how was this process being managed, this resistance? What role did Comey play in the resistance while he was still in the employ of the taxpayer? He wrote his drivel book, or somebody wrote A Higher Loyalty, which I'm sure is to himself rather than that pesky little Constitution thing. But this is something that we really need to go over in laborious detail. How did this idiot, John Brennan, actually even get a security clearance, let alone, you know, I understand in the first period he wanted a high position in the 2009 to 2012 period, but he couldn't get, you know, a Senate confirmed. So there was, you know, Petraeus eventually was pushed out, and Brennan eventually replaced him. How did Brennan get that role? What was he really doing?
Well, calling him an idiot, I think, is generous because he's just so nefarious. We actually covered this extensively last week on the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp, and Kevin gave a really eye-opening presentation about John Brennan and his long history of insanely inappropriate behavior. You've said this, of course, he was a communist. He converted to Wahhabi Islam while he was the station chief in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. He's been linked to the issuance of the passports to the 19 hijackers associated with 9/11. I don't think he's an idiot so much as he is a subversive, sinister, himself treasonous criminal.
Well, here's what I'll differ with you on the idiot thing, because I mean,
maybe he's an idiot.
The issue being that in this country, you don't need to have, especially it's the case that just because you don't have a degree from a top university, that doesn't mean you aren't canny as hell and sensible and an excellent judge of human character. And I think most Americans who care about politics and economics, the state of this country, look at John Brennan's track record and say, this guy's an idiot. Because you know, he believed that he could swagger around, you know, and tell tall tales, and that no one would ever catch him in his lies. And you know, to take on Donald Trump now, it'd be one thing to take him on during the election and call him out, you know, hoping that he wouldn't win.
Right.
But as Donald Trump is going from strength to strength in the face of, you know, the most dedicated, coordinated resistance movement ever assembled. I mean, this guy, Trump, has never had not a second's honeymoon period.
Yeah.
Think about the swooning way in which people on the right and the left immediately embrace Barack Obama, magazine covers. How many magazine covers did Michelle Obama get on? I don't think Melania has had one yet. You know, so anyway.
That's a good point.
So Brennan, to me, I think if I had been him, I would be silent, and I would have all kinds of minions out there making my case. I wouldn't want my name attached as the leader of the resistance movement when somebody obviously like, say, Donald Trump could say, you know, okay, let's go back over the Brennan file and see, you know, what exactly was going on. Oh, there's nothing in the Brennan file. That's interesting. You know, who got the stuff out of the Brennan file? You know, I mean, that's entirely fair game. You don't get to go around working for wherever he's working for now and mouth off.
He had his own intelligence company.
Well, he's also a paid contributor to either MSNBC or one of them. You know, you don't get to do that and then claim that any time the president criticizes you, that's cheap politics. When you're engaged in cheap politics, you just don't get to do that. So he is an idiot. Anyway,
You're right. I stand corrected.
It's okay. So if we just I want to give a shout out to the person who operates Corey's Digs, or whatever it's called here. She has done. This is a lady one of the people who contacted me over Twitter, and I commend this. This is a graphic artist investigator, and her work is extremely thorough. And like the way we do things, she provides links. She lets you check her work and stuff. This is part 2, I think, of a 4-part, extensive, ongoing analysis of Clinton climate change or Clinton climate initiative projects in these poor countries, and the first part was about the Caribbean nations. There's some strange set of projects going on involving green energy, foreign donors, hundreds of millions of dollars in these very poor countries where, unfortunately, corruption is rife, where human trafficking is a problem, where drug trafficking is a problem, and she's digging painstakingly through a lot of detail. And I would encourage people in the crowd to read her work, circulate her work, think about her work. And eventually, I've talked to her last night actually, and she's thinking about whether she might want to come on more than once maybe and tell the crowd more about what she's doing. She's very, very thorough. I admire her work.
Great.
And it's a whole new subject area we can get into on another date.
Oh, yeah.
So, this is an interesting one that I bring up here. This is from December 1988. Now let's think about what happened in December 1988.
88?
Yeah, this is George H.W. Bush has just been elected, his first term. Okay, he hasn't yet inaugurated. And here's a lurid, mysterious scandal begins taking shape in Omaha.
Yeah.
Okay, before it's over a month. This is a special to the New York Times. They're going into this thing and arguing that this Franklin Square scandal may touch George H.W. Bush. This is in the supposed honeymoon period before Bush gets sworn in as president on January 20th, 1989. Now, as I say, I am not an expert. I don't know what happened there.
I'm clicking on the actual article so we can see.
Yeah. Now, this is
Lawrence
a horrible.
King.
This story did play out, and it is a horrible story that orphans at Boys Town in Omaha were being abused.
Turned into prostitutes.
Yeah, and not simply being abused in Omaha, but they were being shipped into Washington D.C., into bipartisan sex parties. This was going on as far back as 1988. Now, remember, we did open this talking about the New World Order and the problems beginning in 1988. So I think this is fair game to bring up from the standpoint of saying, Times is happy to leap on this, right? But we can't look at Pizzagate. We can't look at these allegations about the Podesta brothers and whether other people, and Republicans and Democrats, were engaged trafficking. We can't look at trafficking in Haiti. We can't look at any of that stuff. We can't look at this allegation that was the person you know of who was found dead. The allegation supposedly that Bill Clinton himself may have been involved in.
Well, she had been interviewing a witness who alleges that Bill Clinton had raped him on a yacht, and there are other YouTubers who have been very aggressively trying to reveal that victim's location and identity. Seems to me the only purpose for that would be to intimidate that witness or other witnesses to prevent them from coming forward.
But it would seem to me that we reject, like you were saying, when people say don't do this, it's because you probably should do this. Similarly, when people are saying, well, we need to have perpetual war between Republicans and Democrats, it would seem to me that good-hearted Americans can agree that taking advantage of vulnerable people, children, poor, elderly, uneducated, economically disadvantaged, it's the worst thing you can do, and that we should be able as a country to come together.
Don't do that.
Like whether you're white, black, Hispanic, a dolphin, whatever, you shouldn't be abusing
raping kids,
vulnerable people who have been placed in your care. In the case of these orphans, and I think that it is fair to go back. A lot of people don't know, and it's a horrible area to think about. But sadly, a lot of people in Washington D.C. in positions of great power, maybe people here in New York City, have been engaged in this type of behavior, and it's, I think we ought to know more about this Franklin Square scandal. We ought to know about more about other scandals like this that are being alleged. And I know that Donald Trump signed an executive order, which if we go back into the story, the slides, you'll see, I think there's a link to a story there. Yeah.
I didn't know that the New York Times had covered that Franklin scandal. I thought it was just the Washington Times. I'd never seen that New York Times article before. That was
so late in December 21st, 2017, he signed at least one executive order. I think he signed more than one executive order saying, get ready, we're coming after people involved in these human rights abuses and corruption. When are we going to see the fruits of this?
It's a good question.
It's time to see those fruits, right? Harvest time is upon us. Isn't that the way it works?
Yeah.
So if we go back in, we will make progress, swift progress. If we go to the next page, which I believe, here I'll be quick on this. I have been tweeting out to people, we've talked about it before, 18 U.S.C. 793 is a statute, federal statute, dealing with the gathering, transmitting, and losing of defense information. I.G. Horowitz's report, I believe, incorrectly concluded that there were no signs of willful or intentional, knowledgeable efforts to gather, transmit, and lose sensitive defense information. I just think that's, I mean, I'm going to use a very technical term, utter crap. I mean, you look over there and you say, all right, let's think. Every single Secretary of State in the past has conducted an overwhelming majority of his or her business on secret.
Not on secret.
No,
Secure
servers and using secure electronic devices, primarily from SCIFs, and has kept, those records have been kept in, close control by the government. They weren't taken out of the, Foggy Bottom and put in this mansion or that mansion or this bathroom or this outhouse or this, this party shed or what she shed or whatever. And so that's the evidence I start with. Willful intent is there. There was a private server system. There were multiple private servers. There were multiple devices that were not secure. There were multiple acts of breach bidding. I see intent everywhere. I see somebody who walked off the job with that government property, retained control over that government property, screened that government property with no help from the government, that there was no Inspector General at the State Department. I see sign after sign after sign of willful intent to deceive there. And then when you go carefully and you look through the actual statute, there's 793D and E. One deals with if you had lawful possession of the information, the other deals with if you didn't. And I think in the case of the Clintons, they had both categories. I highly question whether Abedin lawfully acquired a security clearance to see the information that she was allowed to see. I highly question that. I don't think she could have passed fairly any kind of security clearance test, given the flaws in her background and her parents' backgrounds. No way.
Charles, part of the Crowdsource the Truth whole thing is that when I put together the different pieces of information from the various guests that I have, who each have vast knowledge and experience in their own areas, right now you cause me to think of Michael McMahon, who was a former FBI agent who blew the whistle on this vetting process, where he said specifically these security clearances were just being given out and weren't properly vetted. Now, I think honest people approach these things as assuming that it's some sort of oversight or some sort of mistake or loophole or whatever. But the more I think about it, the more I think, Kevin Shipp noticed the same sort of thing in the CIA, a security breach, and they want it there because that's the plausible deniability to let all these people through that opening. Now, whoops, we didn't know. So Hillary storing her information on an unsecured server fits that pattern of having something so unsecured that obviously the information is going to get out. And so intentionally using it and putting your information on it, I think does speak to intent.
Yeah, and to me here, it's not like President Obama can say that, well, I didn't know about this. I mean, there are emails back and forth on his personal email account, which he shouldn't have had in the first place, I don't think, shouldn't have been using on government business, particularly dealing with classified information. There are emails back and forth with him, and if he didn't know that 100% of Hillary Clinton's traffic was over this private service, that's grossly negligent. But more to the point, this Horowitz report omits 18 U.S.C. 793G, which our good accounting friend Kevin noted and suggested I bring up here, that you're guilty of this if two or more persons conspire to violate any of these foregoing provisions. And don't tell me that Valerie Jarrett, Brennan, Obama himself, maybe Biden, later maybe Kerry, didn't know that Hillary Clinton had walked out of the front door or back door, however she got out of the Foggy Bottom, keeping all this information from February 1st, 2013 till December 4th or 5th or 2014, I guess. Don't tell me they didn't know about this.
Well, also, Hillary Clinton doesn't even know sufficiently how a computer operates digitally to understand that wiping it with a cloth isn't a thing. So therefore, Brian Pagliano had to set up the server. Right. He's a government employee. If he's working for her, he also should know that this is not to be done. So there's two people. It's pretty easy to find two people who work together to make this happen.
Right. So, I mean, when we talk about Fantasy Island, it is Fantasy Island to say that the Barack Obama administration was a scandal-free presidency. I mean, I shudder to think, what you would have to do, the people who are judging this to be a scandal-free presidency, I mean, what would you have to do to call it a scandal-ridden presidency? I mean,
just to actually observe any of the things that happened.
So we're going to try to get this done in less than 9 minutes. So for people who look at what Trump is doing in terms of his trade negotiations, the real game here was to get one of Mexico or Canada to agree to a new deal, which would then frustrate China from coming in to the United States through the loose southern state of Mexico. And so Trump has succeeded against all odds, I think. Congress could still screw this up, and the faculty lounge lizards and others can try to gummy it up, and the deep state can try to gummy it up. But it would appear to be that Trump did, and his people did win a trade deal that will, I think, be very good for the manufacturing sector and will put great additional stress on China, by extension on India, who are the chief, China more than India, China's the big trade cheater out there. And I think Canada has abruptly come to the conclusion that actually Trump is in a win-win here. If they fail to do what Trump needs to do, then the people of Canada are going to topple the Trudeau regime, because Trudeau his popularity is nosediving already. So Trudeau could be out either way, if he does a deal or if he doesn't do a deal. But in either case, we'll be better off now that Mexico would appear to be on side.
I wonder if he'll move to Cuba.
Back to Cuba.
Exactly.
And here's this article about Greg Jarrett calling for Chief Justice Roberts to jump in and say, hey, hang on, what really happened here? You guys at Justice, you got these warrants issued and then renewed 2 or 3 times on Carter Page, and that no judge at the FISA court actually looked at this carefully, and you were lying to the FISA court. To rectify that situation, this is the great Clarice Feldman, writes for the great American thinker, explaining that perhaps the one way to get through this is to have the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court look into this. And I hereby call on our allies in the crowd to say, hey, Justice Roberts, what the hell? I mean, I don't like this FISA court to begin with, but here's a clear case where what we were promised by the various swamp rats, who said, we don't really spy on you, James Clapper, not wittingly, of course, as you convinced everybody by his hand gestures that he was lying through what remains of his teeth. I mean, this whole process here, this FISA court should scare all of us, whether you're right-leaning or left-leaning. The notion that there's secret proceedings that are going to allow the bureaucracy to decide that they can spy on Americans, use the great powers that technology has to spy on Americans without their knowledge, tap their phones, do more than that, get into their metadata, get into their bank accounts, and you're not going to know anything about it, is anti-constitutional in my view.
It is.
And now we have a clear case where it was abused, and I think here's another area where people on the right and the left should be able to agree and say, you know what, F this.
It's amazing how they've been so successful in associating anything at all having to do with President Trump. People on the left just agree with it, no matter how onerous or anti-constitutional it might be.
And then there was this story that I found very interesting. I was patrolling around and I came to this story here, and again in American Digital News, suggesting that there's a connection between this cult and the people in the so-called Arizona Mafia, which would be Janet Napolitano and others.
That's interesting.
And on the subject of these sex scandals, the people are arrested in this NXIVM cult, and something's happening there. There are all sorts of strange connections in the NXIVM cult to Democratic donors and to people who are connected to the Clinton Foundation.
One of my least favorite people lives in Arizona.
Who would that be?
People watching know.
All right, there you go. Anyway, so this is just something we'll get into, and people in the crowd who know something about this will be coming back to this issue of the Arizona Mafia. Who knows, it could relate into McCain. Let's not hit this old story here in Breitbart, but it's a fair question. What the hell is Huber doing? This guy who Sessions announced, instead of going for a second special counsel, we'd have this U.S. attorney in Salt Lake City or in Utah, look into questions of corruption, maybe the Clinton Foundation, et cetera. We've had Victoria Tensick, who is Joe DeGenevi's law and life partner, say on air last week that to date, Huber has not asked to speak to William Campbell, the FBI informant. What the hell is Huber doing?
He's collecting checks, sitting around a cush office.
I mean, come on, you were on the case many months ago. Elements of this should be a slam dunk. Certainly the Clinton Foundation stuff is a slam dunk. We have more and more, Greg, we don't need to hit this link because it's Janine did a fantastic thing last night, Judge Janine Pirro, calling on many people to, just come on, put on your big boy pants, Jeff, and either resign or show us that you've actually been doing something in the period that you've been Attorney General. But I think he's really done a very poor job.
Well, Jeff he hasn't done anything.
Yeah. This Catholic Church saga, again, I'm not an expert on these sex abuse scandals, but I think it's not simply a sex abuse scandal, it's also a failure of leadership. It could be an obstruction issue. It could be, some are arguing it rises to the level of being conspiracy, maybe a RICO case. And it's really, I watched the press conference, a bit of the press conference where the Attorney General of Pennsylvania, who I think is a Democrat, and I might stop there and say, well, I don't care what the guy has to say, but I listened to what he had to say. He was speaking with passion, with thoroughness. He wasn't losing his cool. He was making a compelling case. And then when we see the reaction of the church hierarchy, it's just not believable.
Right.
It really isn't.
We did actually a very good show on this with Fireman John just the other day. People can go back into the Crowdsource the Truth archives and see that. Fireman John has read the entire report, and actually on their YouTube channel, the Traffic Report Show, they're doing a special episode, a marathon episode today, going through that whole entire report. And I think you're right, Charles. It is a huge conspiracy, and it is just hitting at the heart of all things so many people hold dear.
So we have this, let's not hit any of these until maybe one at the end. It's crystal clear that Brett Kavanaugh, I think, will be confirmed, barring aliens landing in, more aliens, I should say, landing in Washington, D.C. next week. The Republicans have the votes. There's some key Democrats who are not going to want to obstruct or vote against this. He will be the next justice of the Supreme Court, I think. This idea that Barack Obama is going to win an ethics award, I mean, is just...
That's on the bizarro planet.
Yeah, I mean, I shudder to think what his award, room in his... What are the guys? There's a she shed, and what's the equivalent for a guy? Man cave.
Man cave,
right. His man cave. He's got the Nobel Peace Prize. He's got his book deals and Netflix contract, and now this ethics award. Now you look at that and you say, "Come on!" But then you realize it's in Illinois, so all right, that makes sense. I mean, that's the state where you have to be a crook to get ahead, with some exceptions. Now, again, we won't hit this link, but certain UK television stations are advancing or working apparently with Iran's Ministry of Intelligence to criticize people who are trying to expose Americans and others who are pushing for stories about who are the Europeans who were bribed by Iran as part of this Obama deal. This,
to pay them in euros or whatever?
Well, not just that. I mean, just to get the deal across the line, you had to pay them. People pushing for that, apparently Iran Ministry of Intelligence and certain UK television stations probably are so petrified, because who knows, their parent, people who own those stations may be implicated in this. This is a developing story which I think will be very interesting to watch. I think Donald Trump is deadly serious about imposing very stiff sanctions against Iran, far stiffer than the ones that are out there, come November. And that's the way the legislation works. Now this last one, I try to end with something that's reasonably funny. How did this foundation, which we hit the link, how in the hell did this foundation get approval from Lois Lerner's department or from the IRS? Look at the name of this foundation.
What is it? Animal Farm
Foundation? The Animal Farm Foundation. Who wrote Animal
George
Farm?
Orwell.
Right. You're going to actually approve, and it turns out this is like a fraud-ridden thing is that they talk about what they were doing in reality. None of the stuff they said, and it says here of Bengali, New York. I think it's Bengal, New York, which is not far from where I used to live. Maybe it's Bengali, another town, but yeah, look at this guy. He's just like the kind of person who's going to do a good job taking care of dogs. And apparently, not so much.
Yeah.
So, but it's sad, frankly. Again, this is vulnerable creatures being taken advantage of in a charity.
Like a pit bull.
Huh?
He looks like a pit bull.
Exactly. So with that, Jason, I'm 1 minute over, but...
No, there we go. I think people appreciate these reports, Charles. So thank you again for putting together an excellent and comprehensive overview for us this week. I mean, we're waiting for the swamp to drain. There's always so much going on. We did have a few late-breaking items here, like, for instance, Dick Morris was... he's talking about the Clinton ties to the Uranium One scandal continuing to grow. That's, I mean, as you said, Mr. Deripaska being involved in collusion. There was something going on where he paid millions, 25 million, to try to help get Bob Levinson out of Iran. That's a strange thing. I mean, these are such complicated and convoluted machinations, Charles. It's very difficult for the people at home to even know what's going on. And most of us are behind the eight ball because we've got the news media running interference, trying to overwhelm people with erroneous nonsense to get them not thinking about what's actually going on.
Well, I think that's because too many people accept the idea that the so-called elite. Remember, Trump has this idea that we are actually all super elite and the elite are not elite. But the people who call themselves elite, too many of us at first blush are prepared to say, well, yeah, they are special, and we don't really understand everything that they know, and they must have a reason for doing this. But when you look at hard facts, I sent you an email, Jason, and many emails, but I sent you one about the speech market. And there is, some science to it. You can look at, what people normally get for a speech, and it was a lot of money to get $100,000 for a speech. Yeah. And now Hillary's getting $225,000 a speech after she leaves being Secretary of State to say the same drivel.
I feel like she could earn more money. People would pay her to shut up.
Well, I hope that's what's happening now. But actually, I hope that's not what's happening now.
Well, and then, of course, the question remains: will Mueller subpoena President Trump? I thought you couldn't do that, but this Hill article is. Well,
with the lounge lizard and the captured press, you can always find an expert to say, well, actually, for this set of technical reasons, and Larry Tribe, the Harvard professor, will probably come out and say, yeah, I say this, and somebody else will say that. And the point is, the goal of going down this path is to sow dissension and sow concern, and to make it in the public to try to discredit anyone who might support Trump.
Right.
And that's what they're trying to do. So it could be that they go down that path, even though it's not a winning hand. Yeah. Because there's so much to lose should Trump actually prevail, his people prevail in November.
You've just described an insidious but powerful strategy that's being used in social media as well. It doesn't matter what's legal, it doesn't matter what's right. They just put out these stories, and the same has been happening to me. Fake stories get put out, fake comments get posted, and it tries to dissuade people from supporting, in this case, President Trump, and in my case, Crowdsource the Truth. So the number one thing that people can do if they want to combat the fake news, whether it's coming from other YouTubers or wherever, is to think for themselves. And another important thing to do is to support Crowdsource the Truth by going to patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. Tomorrow, we're going to be starting a new show with Ole Damagard called Light on Conspiracies. And then Tuesday, I am so pleased to announce Michael Moore, Thomas Paine of True Pundit, will be joining me for an exclusive new show. And that's going to be More Pain with Michael Moore. People can get on to Patreon and support any of my only on Patreon guests, as little as $1 per month. You're going to get exclusive access to these live streams, and you can watch those shows, and also know that you're supporting independent journalism, independent free thinking. And Charles, you know, I can't thank you enough for joining me here today. I think everybody wants to get to their barbecues, their families, etc. So I'll see you on Wednesday, where you'll continue to close in on this problem, and hopefully we can drain the swamp sometime next week.
Let's hope so.
All right, Charles, thank you very much. People should go back to the beginning and watch that little animation of the plane coming in.
Well done.
Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow. Light on Conspiracies with Ole Damigard, only on Patreon.